Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Positively Family Law. Our apologies for not being here last week. Had a little issue. I got locked out of my house, so I wasn't able to do it.
It's hard to do a Zoom when you're locked out of your house.
And unfortunately, the Ring doorbells are just not that advanced yet. Can't do those two-way things yet. So one day.
That would have been great though if we did it through the Ring doorbell and you're like this the whole time.
What's up? Alrighty, so in the spirit of this weekend being Easter, we had the idea, well, actually Heather had the idea of talking about holiday scheduling in regards to divorce or custody, either one. So I'm going to let Heather go ahead and explain, and I will ask certain questions here and there. And then if you guys have any additional questions afterwards, please send them to us and we can review those as well. So
are we able to get questions during the live Zoom, or I'm not sure exactly how that works.
Yeah, I believe we can. Okay. If you do want to comment below, I'll get the notification and we can address that while we're talking.
Okay, great. Yeah, so if somebody shoots a question, if you have a specific question in regard to holiday schedules or what to think about, and you want to ask, feel free to do that. And Kayla can kind of interrupt me and we can go from there. All right, so basically, holiday schedule is an important part of your parenting plan when you go through a divorce or when you have a custody issue, because of the fact you have your regular parenting schedule, which let's just say it's 2 days a week on, 2 days a week off, and then every other weekend if you're doing a 50-50, or if you think of the more traditional where one parent is called the primary placement and the other one has like every other weekend and maybe a dinner visit over the week. That takes place until there's a holiday. And your important holidays that most people end up fighting over are typically Christmas, Easter, which is why we thought about it this weekend, Thanksgiving, all the major ones, New Year's Eve, but then you also get into some of the smaller ones like St. Patrick's Day. You know, there's some people that really celebrate that and they want to, make sure they have their kids so they can all wear green. I'm Irish, which is why I picked that one out of all of them. Nothing against the other holidays. Or Halloween is another big one where who's going to take the parents? Is it going to fall with the regular parenting schedule? Is it going to be special? There's really no right way to do it. And every family is going to deal with their holiday schedule a little bit different, but it is something that comes up whenever there's children involved. So it is something that you need to think about. And either if you can agree, that's fantastic. And if you can't, and it's a case that ends up in court, the judge will make an order over holidays. So to get started, one of the hard things, especially if you're coming out of a divorce situation where, or a live-in situation, because that's very similar, where you're around your kids all the time, regardless of whether you like your spouse or not, you still are both there to spend Christmas together, to wake up with them in the morning, to, get the turkey ready and have the big family dinner. Those are all things that you get to do every single year because you're together. Once the marriage or the relationship is over, that ends as well. And that can be really hard for people. And that first holiday where you don't have your children there can be really tough. So right now, I just want to take a second to talk about if this is your first Easter and you don't have your kids, you're not spending time with them. Make sure you have something planned for yourself. Don't wallow in sadness because you don't have your kids. Still try to make the best of it because your kids see that you're not happy and you don't want them to see that. So, plan a different celebration. As much as I love my kids, when I went through my divorce and it wasn't my year to have them, I got to relax much more than I would when the kids weren't there. So if you focus on the positive instead of the negative, it not only makes the holiday much more enjoyable for you, but it will make it more enjoyable for your kids because they will sense that in you. They won't have to worry that they're off at mom's house or dad's house and their other parent is, missing them and sad. That shouldn't be what the kids are concerned about on the holiday. Now, that being said, we can talk about, some of the different ways that holidays can be divided. So If the issue goes before the judge, and unfortunately, there are a number of cases where people just can't agree to anything, and those issues have to be presented to a judge. Typically, what's going to happen in that case is the judge is just going to say alternating years. They might put times on it. They might put, how they divide it is going to be up to the judge. But typically, you're not going to get a very detailed schedule. You might get something that doesn't work for either one of you. And it's just whatever the judge says. So it's really best if you can't agree on anything else, try to agree on the holiday schedule. And where you should start with figuring that out is looking at how you typically will spend holidays. Now, that being said, everything changes when you break up, whether you're leaving a marriage or you're leaving a live-in situation. It changes. So you do have to be cognizant of that, because let's say every year, for Christmas, you do Christmas in the morning, and then you go to one family's house for dinner, and then you do the other family's house for dessert. And let's just say that's how you do it. Well, once you are no longer together, that type of schedule isn't necessarily going to work. So even if it was a past history, you may have to change it moving forward. Now, with that, there may be holiday traditions within your own family that don't change on a year-to-year basis. For example, for my own divorce, my ex-husband's family generally always did a big Thanksgiving dinner on Wednesday, because it worked for the other adults in the family. It worked for, them with their other parts of the family, for those that were married. So we always did Wednesday night at his house. And then we did Thanksgiving Day at my parents' house. And so that worked for us. Once we got divorced, we just kept going with what was the custom. And it broke it up nice, and it worked for both of us because of the fact it provided each one of us with the time that was important. And we didn't get hung up on Thanksgiving Day. It wasn't, oh, I want Thanksgiving Day. It was, what do we typically do? What works and what's best for our kids? And, that was one of the things we could agree upon. So that was nice. So in other holidays, and especially we'll talk about Easter since that's the one that's current, there are so many different ways to divide Easter. So again, no way is right. It all depends on what works for you, what works for your kids, and what works for your spouse or, the other parent. So just throwing out some ideas in case this is a situation that you're thinking about, although at this point, my guess for Easter, it's probably too late because you should have already thought about it. But it could be that you just follow the regular base schedule. If you alternate years, you can sometimes look ahead and see if it typically alternates. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, because I think when you do that, what happens is for like 3 years in a row, the same parent will get the same weekend because of the leap year situation. Or the same holiday. So and Easter actually changes the dates, so that might not be one that falls into that, but I know Thanksgiving often does because it's always that Thursday. Yeah. So that's one way to do it, not the best way to do it, but that is a way. Mm-hmm. Another way to do it is to divide the day. Whoever has them at night, the other parent gets them, say, let's 12 o'clock, and then they can do dinner and their Easter egg hunt or whatever they do. Now, for some families, church might be heavily involved with Easter. If they look at Easter as more of a religious holiday than a secular holiday, they might want to get up, they might want to go to church. And that might be what's important to them, where they're able to negotiate on something else. Maybe the other parent will get the entire weekend, as long as that parent can bring them to church on Sunday and then they bring them back. There's no right way. It all depends on what works best for you and your family and what you can negotiate. Now, you might have kids that don't really do good with a lot of back and forth, or maybe you live too far away to make it reasonable to transport in the middle of the day without basically ruining the entire day. In that type of situation, you might want to think of alternating years, including the weekend. So again, there's a lot of ways to do it. You want to think about what works for you, what works with Well, I'll give an example of what doesn't work. And that was they didn't take into consideration who had them the night before. And one parent, this was actually what they planned, but it came back in and for a modification because it didn't work. And we didn't represent them when this plan went into play because I never would have recommended it. At the end of the day, it's the people's choice, but we kind of can tell what's going to work and what doesn't. So regardless of who was there, one parent wanted to do an early morning Easter egg hunt. So they lived about an hour away from each other. So they agreed that the parenting time would start at 6 a.m. in the morning, and they would have them until 11. And then the other parent would get them from 11 until 7. So there were some times, now, number one, you have the kids getting up extremely early if they're not with the parent who this 6 a.m. time is really important to. So you have the kids getting up really, really early. Then you have, depending on whose weekend it is, up to 4 different transitions. 3 different transitions within 1 day period. That is a lot of back and forth. So of course they come back in a modification. One parent wants a modification. The other parent thinks, no, this is working. Well, it wasn't working and it changed, but it was a big time expense and financial expense to fix something that was a good chance that it wasn't going to work out in the first place. So those are some things to think about, in relation to Easter. So Kayla, do you have any questions that come up typically within holiday schedules?
Well, so I think the biggest one is Christmas. I think that's the biggest conflict one. People say, well, I'm supposed to get them on New Year's Eve, but I don't get to open presents with them on Christmas morning and like this and that. Like, what would you say is a good thing to keep in mind when dealing with a holiday like Christmas, where it's a big one? Easter's big, Christmas is like the big one. And you do kind of get a benefit because you have Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Mm-hmm. I guess, what kind of things in your experience would you say for people to keep in mind when dealing with that specific holiday?
Sure. So I agree. I think Christmas is usually, and some people don't celebrate it, and it actually makes Christmas really easy, but I think most people do. And whether it's because of religious purposes where, they believe in the whole biblical part of the story, or, their religious preference incorporates Christmas. And again, there might be church involved. For a lot of people, even if they practice it religiously, it's also a secular holiday. And there's a lot of combining of those two things. So a lot of people, and I've heard the argument of, I'm a Christian or I'm a Catholic, we believe in Christmas and the religion, so it's a religious holiday and I want the kids completely. But it doesn't diminish the fact that the other parent, even if they're not a practicing Catholic or Christian, and I'm assuming many of the other religions practice Christmas as well, or celebrate Christmas as well, it doesn't take away from the other parent being able to spend Christmas with their kids. So if both parents want it, the court typically will let both parents have it. If one person is trying to argue religiously, it's not generally going to be an argument that flies. So Christmas is difficult because it's one where when you're by yourself, it is hard. Christmas morning is really hard when you don't have your kids. But again, like I said before, it's something to think about where you just have to look at the bright side of it. Now, I remember, I guess I'm sharing more personal history today, but I remember, my first Christmas without my kids, and it was tough. Like, it was really tough. I woke up and you're expecting to hear the laughter and like the giddiness and the excitement of unwrapping the presents under the tree. And then you walk into your living room and it's just you and a tree and a bunch of presents that you spent a lot of time wrapping with nobody to open. So that's sad. That's not fun. But what I ended up doing, and what I think my kids would not say that it worked out. Christmas is, December 25th is a day, and the majority of people celebrate Christmas on December 25th. But what we actually did is made it whatever weekend we had, whatever weekend I had the kids after Christmas, we'd make that the day that we did Christmas, so it was like our own Christmas. And the kids would always say, it's like we literally get 3 Christmases, because we split up, whoever had them Christmas Eve, the other person would get them at like noon on Christmas Day, and then you get to celebrate the rest of Christmas. So for me specifically, let's say my ex had them Christmas Eve. So they were with him until noon on Christmas Day. Then I'd get them. We'd go to my parents' house. They'd get to do, the presents with my parents, would do dinner. And then I wouldn't just bombard them with more presents, because then it's just present overload and they just don't care anymore. Not that they don't care, but it becomes tiring. So we'd actually wait and redo all the little celebrations that, reading the night before Christmas. It doesn't have to just be on December 24th, it can be on a different day. So create your own Christmas. Don't get hung up on the fact that you don't have them from the 24th to the 25th. Create your own. There's nothing that keeps you from doing that. And if nothing else, a benefit is if the Christmas candy all goes on sale. So you can actually spend less money if you wait a week to do Christmas. So it's kind of like a win-win. So I think emotionally, that part's important. The different things to think about Christmas are, is one parent, because of the fact that, the complexity of the holiday, there's usually a vacation period when kids are little, so they get a break from school. If one parent wants to be able to travel, during the holiday, during Christmas, you might have to look at an annual or, an alternating yearly schedule, rather than somebody gets Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or work something out where if everybody's there, you do a Christmas Eve to Christmas Day, switch off on a year-to-year basis, so both parties can share, the putting to bed and the waking up, and then the next day. Then I forget what I was just talking about. That's horrible. What was I just saying?
We're talking about things to consider with Christmas.
Yeah, I know. And this isn't even like a trial where I can ask them to repeat the question. We're talking about Christmas Eve. Oh, and traveling. That's what we were talking about. So if everybody's there, you can still do that. But you might want to think about, if somebody is going to travel over the Christmas break, wording in so that the other parent has the ability to do that as well. So there's a notice requirement that goes into that. There's, making sure that one parent doesn't take advantage of that situation and just say every year, hey, I'm going away, so I'm taking the kids this entire Christmas. You don't want that situation either. So you want to make sure that you're thinking in advance, because you also don't want to plan a schedule that a year or two later, people have to come back into court. When we work out our agreements, we're looking for how can we really make a long-term, long-reaching agreement that gives some flexibility depending on the situation, but also keeps them from having to come back into court. It's not always possible, because a lot of situations change, and kids have different preferences, or something might come up that requires a modification, but that's what we try to do. And that's what you should do as well. Try to be flexible with thinking about what do we do in these types of situations, especially then when you get even more complexity with involving a new spouse or a new partner, and they have children, and trying to coordinate it. When you get divorced, typically, not always, but typically, you haven't met that other person yet. Sometimes you do, and that's why you got divorced, but typically you don't. And so when, let's say, for example, it's my year to have Christmas, and then I meet somebody else who has kids, and they're on opposite schedules. I might want to make sure that they're all together on Christmas. So it might take some working with the other parent to see, can we work this out? Or you might want a situation where they're all together, but you don't want that, because you want each family to be able to have their own celebrations. There's a lot of things that can happen, and it's really important as a parent. And it does suck, because it's never really fun to think of your kids spending time with somebody else who's not you. And with your ex, getting involved in another relationship, that can sometimes be emotionally hard, especially if you think of your kids leaving you for Christmas to go off with your ex and some new person. But it's not about you. It's not about the parents. This is really about the kids and what's best for them. And if there's no safety concerns, if there's nothing that, is neglect or anything that is really bad, I would really urge you to work with the other parent on that rescheduling. Now, I completely understand if your ex is with a new person every single year, and every single year they want to change the parenting schedule because they found somebody new and they have other kids. That I get to. And there is a point where you have to say, no, our kids are going to come first. You're going to have to work your schedule around our kids. It's a fine line, and it doesn't mean, me saying that doesn't mean you always have to be like, oh yeah, you have another girlfriend or you have another boyfriend with different children, yeah, let me revamp my entire schedule for you. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying though, if it's a long-term relationship, if it's serious, work with it. It's best for the kids when everybody can get along. And I'm remarried and my husband has little kids, and I never look at myself as their mother, but I'm like a bonus parent almost. And it's best for them to see if people can get along. It's best for any kids to see that their parents and any new partners can get along. It is important. Not always practical, not always able to happen, but good. So don't let Christmas, become a jealous situation where you just don't want your kids to be with somebody else and you're going to make living hell for the other parent, because it just isn't good for your children.
Exactly. And exactly what you said, like these holidays, while it's nice that you get the kids for the holidays, at the end of the day, it is about the children. It's about what's best for them. And like you said, if there's no safety concerns, like you kind of have to put your own feelings aside and do what's best for them.
Yep.
One last thing. So is there a difference between, obviously there is, but like in terms of when you're figuring out these schedulings, is there a difference between holidays and like vacation, summer vacation, or, like a 3-day holiday, a 3-day vacation, or winter or spring break, stuff like that? Is there a difference when it comes to that? Or is it kind of all structured the same way when you go through either a modification or figuring out that plan in the beginning?
Sure. I just wrote that all down because that's 3 different things and I don't want to lose track of thought again. So those are all different. And typically you want to write language into your agreement that vacation time is going to supersede your base parenting time, but that holiday time supersedes vacation time unless the holiday specifically falls within a vacation period. Because of the fact you don't want somebody looking at the other person's holiday schedule and then saying, oh, but I'm going to take my vacation, right during there, and then you lose your holiday time. So you definitely want that hierarchy. For a 3-day weekend, typically, what's said is assuming that the parents have an alternating weekend schedule. If you get into anything different than an alternating schedule, sometimes this doesn't work because, if you do, say you do a 2-2 and a 1 schedule, there's a greater chance for one person to have a long weekend than the other person. That's not necessarily fair. So again, speaking solely to an alternating weekend, it might be that you just add, if a Monday holiday and there's no school falls after the parents' typical weekend and they don't have the kids on the Monday, they get to extend it so that if you have the weekend, you have the entire long weekend and you don't have to do that transition on the Monday. That can sometimes happen if the kids have a Friday off of school. I've worked that into agreements before as well. So it's not just you're looking at the Monday holiday. It might be that they don't have school on Friday. So if they don't have school on Friday and they don't have to wake up early, it might be more advantageous to the children to do the transition Thursday night so they can sleep in Friday morning and not have to get up and do a transition when they otherwise could be sleeping. So that's something to think about. In regard to winter and spring vacation, typically you alternate. So if one party has February vacation, the other party would typically have April, and then the next year you just flip flop. That way, you know, both parents get the joy of the cold weather versus the little bit warmer weather. However, you might have a situation where one parent is an avid skier and February vacation to them is really, really important. They want to take the kids skiing. They want to make sure they have that time every February. They might want to take every February and the other parent gets every April. Again, some of that comes down to looking at what you guys have typically done and what's really important to you. Now, that being said, again, if that same avid skier that gets to take the kids one February and then the next February just gets to go hang out with their friends or, you know, a new significant other, that might be something that's important to them as well. So even if you're thinking, you know, I always take the kids every February to go skiing, you might enjoy once in a while not having them, because as much as we love our children, we also can sometimes use a break for them. And I say that with love as a mother. So then when we talk, about regular vacation, so we talk about, and to touch back on the February and April,
Yeah.
a lot of times, you know, then it becomes, how exactly are we defining that? Because if it's an alternating weekend schedule, you can do it in a couple different ways. You can either say that the person who's vacationing with them gets them from the second they get out of school on Friday until they go back to school on Monday. Sorry, my email just popped up. So that can be one way you do it. Another way you do it is you keep the weekends intact, so neither parent lose out on their weekend time. And then it's from Monday to Friday is the holiday period. There's no, again, right way to do it. It's just a matter of preference and making sure that it's the same on both sides so that one parent isn't getting screwed. For your typical summer vacation, if it goes in front of the judge will say 2 weeks non-consecutive, notice has to be given to the other parent by May 15th. Parent A gets to choose first, you know, in odd years, parent B gets to choose first in even years. That's typically how it will go. That doesn't mean it works best for everybody, but if there's a huge fight over vacation time, you can't work it out, just revert back to that, because it is not worth it to go to trial to fight over getting 2 non-consecutive weeks from the judge. The bigger issue, I think, that comes up with that is when people want to travel internationally. You typically need more than a 1 week time frame to do that, because you eat up 2 days just in travel alone. If you're traveling far, you eat up more than 2 days. So for that specific, you know, if you think that you might travel internationally in the future, or you generally do, you might want to work out that it's not the non-consecutive, which just means that they can't be 2 weeks in a row. You might really want to make sure that you're fighting for those 2 weeks in a row and verbalize it that you want the ability to travel internationally. And it might be an exclusion. You know, it might be 2 non-consecutive weeks unless traveling internationally, which in that case, they can take their 2 weeks consecutively. The other thing that becomes a big issue with that are passports. And, you know, people get very afraid. Some people have just cause. You know, some people do run off and, you know, leave to go to another country with children. And it absolutely does happen. So there is a verified fear for some people. Some people, I think it's more a fear in their head. It's not going to happen. You know, the other parent is not going to take your children and run off and, you know, go hide away in another country most of the time. But I can't tell you how many times I hear, you know, I don't want them to have a passport because what if they just take the kids and leave? It's probably not going to happen, not worth going to trial. But there are certain things that can be done to minimize that risk if there is, you know, sometimes even if there's a concern, just to be able to get over the hump of that concern. And that might be if there's 2 kids, each parent keeps a passport. And you work in language that at least 30 days prior to travel, the other parent has to give the passport to the traveling parent. That's a way to kind of get over they're going to take the kids and they're going to run. because even less likely than them taking off are that they're just going to take one. They're probably going to want both. Sometimes it's about, understanding that people might have a fear, regardless of how based in reality it is or not, and coming up with ways to be able to get over that so you can move forward and actually reach agreements.
Yeah. And the best place to start, if you have questions about your, current arrangement, or if you want things changed, talk to an attorney, call our office. We have handled plenty of modifications when it comes to that. And, the bottom line at the end of the day is these schedules are put in place to help your children, because this is obviously a transition. This is something, regardless of what your situation is, this is something that the children now have to go through. So, making sure that holidays and summers and vacations are all squared away should be in the best interest of the children. So just remember that, because.
Yep. And to touch base on two other things that I kind of thought about. So Mother's and Father's Day, a lot of times when the parents are together, what you see is that, and let's just use Mother's Day, for example. So let's say I'm married and I've got my kids, and my husband says, it's Mother's Day, so I'm going to take care of the kids today, and you're going to go off and have a spa day and really enjoy Mother's Day, so you can get some time yourself, you can get pampered. When it comes to court, people fight over Mother's and Father's Day, wanting the kids. Something to think about might be doing that in reverse, so you do get that day off. And it might not work, again, for every family. You might want to have the kids on your designated day, but you might want to look at it as your gift to the other parent, so that during that day they can actually relax, and that's not a bad thing. Another thing to think about is when you have same-sex couples and they have Mother's and Father's Day. If you have two moms or you have two dads, they don't really fit into one or the other. So it might be that, you want to split. If it's two dads, you might want to split Father's Day, or you might want to just look at splitting that weekend to make sure that, each parent has time. Again, it's not the qualification of the day. It's the same thing going back to the Christmas holiday. It's not necessarily the title of the day, it's the time with your kids. And I think when you can put that into consideration and keep that at the forefront, it becomes much easier to make some of these decisions. Another thing is, don't make issues out of things that aren't issues. I was doing a divorce. I still laugh about it. This was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago or something. And I'm sitting trying to work out a holiday schedule with the couple. We fought over Christmas, probably about 2 hours. We did Christmas. We finally got past Christmas. We're doing some of the other holidays. I think Christmas was our big hurdle here. So we're sitting arguing over the holidays, and then they start arguing over Hanukkah. And they're talking about, how are we going to split it? I want so many nights. You can't have that many nights because it takes away from my parenting time. And I'm sitting thinking about the entire case, and I look at them, I go, do you guys actually celebrate Hanukkah? Because you guys aren't Jewish. And they were like, well, no, but we want the holiday. And that was stupid. We wasted a lot of time, a lot of money over something that neither one of them celebrated and wasn't really important to them. And that was a great example, I thought, of parents fighting to win rather than do what's right. And that is what you do not want to do. Don't make things more complicated. Don't fight over things just to win. This isn't about winning.
Exactly. Now, when you said Mother's and Father's Day, that made me think, what about the children's birthday? Is that something that you can put into it, or? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get, again, it can be as vague or as detailed as you want. So you can get into the kid's birthday, you can get into the parent's birthday. There might be a grandparent involved that lives close, that every year, because you don't know how long your grandparents are going to be around for, it might be that there's a big celebration on their birthday. You can definitely get into all those things. Now, when it comes specifically with birthdays, Some of it's going to matter of whether it's during the school year or the summer, because it becomes much more difficult to split a birthday that is during the school year. It might be that you each just make sure there's designated time that you can throw a birthday party. You know, it might not be focused on the actual day itself, but making sure that you have the birthday party. That then brings up, you know, if you can't necessarily invite the kids' friends to 2 different birthday parties. So do you do a joint birthday party? Do you do separate birthday parties? Do you alternate years with throwing the friends' birthday parties? So especially if both parents can't get along enough to go to the birthday parties, there is a lot of complexity and there's no right answer. And it can create a lot of conflict, and you can almost get lost in the weeds here. Like once you start swimming, you're just like, oh, wait, what about this issue? What about this issue? And it just, sometimes it can make it more complex. And sometimes you might think you have something great and then it just doesn't work in reality. So it's important to just remember that it's about what's working best for your kids, not you. You know, if splitting a day, if you agree when your kids are little to split the day, somebody gets the morning, somebody gets the afternoon or the night, and then your kids are in school, rather than having them split from 3 to 8 with 2 hours with each of you, you might just want to work out something different, you know, and you can do that without even having to go for a modification. So if you want to make little changes to your agreement that work for you guys, you can do that. If you want to hold the other person to those changes, that's when those changes would need to be made in court.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but you know, just I like what you said about don't make things more harder than it needs to. Don't make an argument out of nothing, you know, focus on, you know, what you want as a person, because, you know, especially if you're going through a divorce, you know, this may be your chance to get certain time frames, you know, kind of to yourself and be able to celebrate yourself, because now, you know, you're going through something completely different. You know, you're changing your life when you go through something like that. And, you know, really focus on what's best for the kids, what's easiest for the kids, especially when they're little. You know, obviously as they get older, you know, things may change in your entire schedule from, you know, from January to December, the whole thing may change given their ages. So, you know, think of all of those factors, and, you know, really the best thing is to be able to work with the other person. Not everybody do that.
And I think sometimes, you know, and it's wonderful when it happens, when there's a divorce and the parents say, oh no, we get along great. You know, we don't have to put anything in because we're just going to work it out. And so they just want, the parents will share time on the holidays, which is great, so long as they continue to be on friendly terms. So, you know, again, not to make things more complicated or make issues where there shouldn't be issues. Even if you can get along really well, sometimes it's good just to lay out a base plan. That way, for any reason, and you see this mostly when somebody, you know, finds somebody else, that all of a sudden everything's getting along, everything's fine. And then the other parent finds somebody else. And then the parent who doesn't have somebody else says, oh, well, there's nothing in here that actually says you get Christmas Eve and Christmas, so you can have them for 2 hours on Christmas this year. That's not cool. So sometimes it would be good to have a base schedule just in case the future is not quite as friendly as it is now.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned, you know, it's a little bit too late because Easter is this weekend, but if you have certain holidays that, you know, you want addressed, or if you have questions about your current holiday schedule, give us a call, and, you know, we can do a consult with one of our attorneys. They can review it and go over, you know, pros and cons of switching things around depending on your situation.
Yeah. And that's always a cost benefit analysis. You know, what is it going to cost you to get the changes you're looking for? Sometimes it might be easier just to talk to the other person. Sometimes you just can't. And that's where an attorney can come in.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, this is very informative. I hope that.
I know it was longer than normal, right?
Yeah, it was, but you know, it's a lot, and it's like you said, you know, there are so many different options when it comes to holiday schedules. So, you know, and it's going to be tailored to what the specific person needs, and, you know, your children and yourself and the other person. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. It's a complex situation. It's not as cut and dry as people may think, you know, just, oh yeah, we'll split a down the middle. Well, it's not really like that in real life. So, but yeah, this was good. And, if you do have your children this year for Easter, have a great Easter. And if not, I hope you can find something to celebrate by yourself. You can do your own like adult Easter egg hunt.
Hide nips around the house.
I found one.
Anyway, all right. Well, if you celebrate it, happy Easter. If not, have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.